heard of, is one of the leading political economists on South Asia. And the center has come on leaps and bounds over the last 25 years. Some of that work I'll be going over in the next few moments. But I think one narrative that's important to keep in mind is the establishment of CASI as a research center on India and the opening up of India during the economic liberalization reforms of '91. And both stories have gone hand in hand in terms of the research that is conducted at CASI and the breadth, but also the depth in which that is conducted, and the challenges that India faces, both on the political economy side, but we currently are looking at a few different streams. One is international migration. The other is the public-private partnerships arena, which I'll talk about a little bit later, security and foreign policy, the urban environment, agricultural markets, and socially marginalized groups. And these 6 buckets essentially cover a whole gamut of projects that we're currently undertaking, some of which are in collaboration with institutions in India. And these are ongoing projects that are continually receiving grants and which we have an output for within, as it pertains to conferences.
A long history of working in your country. I have a long history of building partnerships with faculty in India. And this most recent iteration of my work in India, which is the partnership between the Graduate School of Education and the Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai, is in fact the most exciting work that I've done thus far in India. Any of you who are familiar with the work of Dr. Venkatesh Kumar, who is a senior faculty member at the Tata Institute. He was at the University of Mumbai for many years. He is an incredible example of how stellar research can lead to grounded public policy. So his work really sits at the nexus of political science, public and educational policy, and national development. He works, as I do, directly with the Ministry of Human Resource Development. So this partnership is focused broadly on post-colonial or anti-colonial development. How do we look at the reimaginings and restructuring of organizations and institutions to push against what you all know to be neo-colonial ways of looking at education? How do we revive and resurrect, for example, through the RUSA initiative, the RUSA scheme, the public universities? How do we look at the 4 pillars of access, equity, excellence, and accountability for public universities in India? And so I'll go into each of these, but I just wanted to say that we're looking across school education, higher education, and community development, particularly in the corridor most hit by Maoist insurgency. And again, a term used in India, which I don't fancy, which is the backwards areas. I don't like the term because it deficitizes the people there. And as you know, that's a very big problem in India as elsewhere, is that the underclass is typically disrespected and marginalized. So I try to resist that language. I find it offensive personally, but it is the national language of India, so I'll go with it with you. I'm hoping to change the national language of India, one talk at a time, because it is really problematic. So, okay, so please excuse my Hindi. Rashtriya Uchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, RUSA. As many of you may know, it's a federally funded scheme. It started with Prime Minister Singh and has found its way through to Prime Minister Modi's government. It's just been guaranteed an additional 5 years of funding, which is an enormously important strategy to go through the next set of elections. And so the statistics are of the 789, and I just told it there are now 792, public universities in India. We are working with 359 of the state public universities. And so it's an enormous scope of a project. What it is the architecture is about infrastructure development, organizational development, and then an intensive arm which is professional development for the leaders and their constituencies in each of these public universities. And we have done we've done 25 two-day seminars with vice chancellors from across public universities, and we'll continue to do so until we've reached all of those vice chancellors. We will then, they have action plans, and we'll then meet again with them at a year's time to check in on their progress. But there's also a real-time portal to track progress, and that's for the sake of transparency, and to make sure that the funds that are allocated for RUSA are in fact used in the ways that they're allocated. And so one of the things about RUSA is that it's really towards fomenting really accountability in the public university system. And as you all know, that's an enormous problem. Accountability, transparency, rigor in studies, mentorship of faculty to publish, which is relatively non-existent across even the top universities in India. So these are massive problems. We're working with publishers. We've really thought about this in a comprehensive way. We're working with publishers to create pipelines for junior faculty to be mentored in terms of being able to publish their empirical work. Things that it's an epidemic in India that you have some of the most educated faculty who are really under-supported to write. And so the problem persists of using external sources in Indian higher education classrooms. The Tata Institute of Social Sciences was asked almost 8 years ago by the Singh government to create a corporate social responsibility hub to oversee the work of the corporate social responsibility initiatives that were 11 years ago, as many of you are aware. The federal government of India instituted a rule that the public serving enterprises in the most minoritized and underserved areas, largely the same corridor with Maoist insurgency and underdevelopment, that those public serving enterprises needed to plow 10% of their profits back into the very environments that their factories or refineries or shipyards are in. Dr. Kumar runs the hub. I am now co-running the hub with him. This is actually really my passion, is this work. Community development, working with not just the public serving enterprise, CSR, corporate social responsibility arm. We work directly with communities. We work directly in tribal communities, and we work with the most minoritized populations. I work a lot with Dalit women. And we work with them to create sustainable livelihood solutions. So we all know about the skilling issues and the skilling movement and alternative livelihoods. I worked for 10 years in the development of alternative livelihoods with farmers in Telangana. And so it's that kind of a mindset that one needs to think about, alternative livelihoods, that one needs to think about alternative skilling processes for tribal and underserved people in the areas they live in. So the CSR Hub serves to work with the PSEs, with the public enterprises, to develop viable sustainable community development projects. That could be anything from the development of weaving co-ops or canneries for fishing. We worked in Goa, for example, with a group of women over a period of time to create a sustainable agro-dairy and soil production plant. So lots of different projects that look like lots of different things, but the horizontal across them is sustainable development that is led by the people of particular communities, so the public serving enterprise creates an infrastructure in which we work through a participatory process with community members.
Basically self-help groups.
Self-help, that's exactly, self-help groups. And so we work with those self-help groups, not through NGOs though. We work directly with the corporate social responsibility money. We often create the self-help groups with them actually, so thank you. Because, those are groups, for example, in Maharashtra, we're working with women in the panchayats, in the more rural areas of Maharashtra, looking at particularly women's governance issues, leadership development, the co-optation of some of the women's voices, as you know, by the men in the communities, which happens. And we're working with a group of waste pickers, women waste pickers from the largest slum in Mumbai. And we're working with them on the development of a sustainable waste picker union. And so these are just examples. And so in the case of the waste pickers, we've formed a self-help group with them that now can advocate for their own funding. We've unionized them so that they can resist some of the pilfering that was happening from their profits by others in the slums. And so those are the kinds of examples of the kinds of projects that we work on. And it's very grassroots, it's very hands-on. Dr. Kumar and myself are in the field doing this with our field researchers. We supervise a team of 48 field researchers, master's and doctoral level researchers who do this work, who develop the projects. And we're there really for supervision, technical support. I'm often the one that goes into communities to try to create the leadership necessary for communities to feel agentic enough to take on these projects and not create a dependency model. So this is a very interesting hub, also has outlived multiple governments, and is really seen as one of the ways that a university in India with a history like the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. So it started, as you know, as a social work school, and has a history of public advocacy and civic engagement. These are the ways that Tata Institute formalizes institutional and civic engagement. And it's really, it's a tremendous opportunity. I just want to talk about bilateral exchange for a moment. I imagine you're here in part because we're thinking about different partnerships that might be able to happen. So first I want to say Dr. Kumar and I met because of CASI. I'm pointing at you like you embody CASI, but because of CASI, which brought Dr. Kumar over as a scholar in residence. Because I was friends with Devesh Kapoor for 20 years since I've been here. We had lunch, the three of us, and Dr. Kumar and I realized that we should work together. So, partnerships aren't always as difficult as it might seem to develop. He and I had a vision together. By the end of his 3 months here, we had a memorandum of understanding and a scope of work for 5 years. So partnerships are an interesting thing, and I think networking is important. So I'll just say a little bit that what does Penn get out of this partnership is, I think, a very important thing for you to hear, because we get a lot out of it. And then I'll go on to talk about our third initiative, and then I'll stop. So what does Penn get out of this? Well, one thing I'll show you is, we get professional development and incredible learning for our students. So I run a team of 10 doctoral students who work in India with me, and 1 postdoctoral fellow. And I had another postdoctoral fellow who just finished. And so what do we get out of it? We get so much learning. We get so much learning. We get tremendous partners who are really ready to engage in civically altering endeavors in higher education, in school education, in community development. My students get to do their field work in India. Most of my students are Indian. They're here for their educations. One might argue it's a good way to plow them back into the Indian system, since they go there to complete their dissertations and then hopefully get picked up by Indian universities. And so there's a lot when you think about the pipeline of Indian talent coming to the US, which is one of your greatest exports. We benefit from that, and we benefit from supporting them and doing work back in their own country. And we benefit from the cultural and educational engagement, from learning about your system. I'm being mentored by one of your preeminent professors. We're the same age. He's still mentoring me. He knows a lot more than I do. And so I get a lot out of it personally. And so it's a mutually enriching thing. And I think that's a very important way to conceptualize any partnerships you'd engage in outside of India. to push against the notion that you have more to gain from us than we have to gain from you. That's a seductive international trope that one should resist, I think. So, what'd you say?
Well said.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, okay, so let me go back. I'm technologically very, very, very challenged, but Amy showed me all sorts of magic. So, okay, so let's go back. Okay, Caleb, I just want to talk briefly about our school education project. So, we're one of 5 sites that have been chosen by the government to provide pilot teacher professional development and principal education for kindergarten through 12th grade 12 in India. Or just say 12th standard. Is that, yeah, 12th standard in India. So basically our goal is to create a national level reform scheme of principal and teacher professional development. That means, of course, working with existing undergraduate and master's level teacher education programs, and it means mid-service teacher education and mid-service and pre-service principal education. And so that's what we're working on, and we're working on creating a model that can do that in a way that really understands not just public education, but tribal education, rural education. You know, context is obviously everything in education, and so how can you contextualize teacher and principal professional development so that people are really armed with what they need. So we work with Urdu medium schools, Hindi medium schools, English medium schools, public schools, private schools, tribal schools, various kinds of NGO schools. And the goal is to try to create a functional set of criteria for teacher and principal excellence. And we're doing that through intensive focus groups that we've been running with principals and teachers. We work closely with the Global Educational Leadership Foundation, if any of you are familiar with it. It's based in Delhi, run by Gauri Ishwaran, who created the Sanskriti School many years ago, and she is a close friend and partner in this work. And she's working with the Tata Institute now. We've kind of poached her a little bit. She'll now be working full-time with the Tata Institute on the Caleb Initiative. So we are very honored to work with such a veteran educational pioneer in India. She's a tremendous resource to us. And she has very close ties to Penn, actually. I met her on Penn's campus 16 years ago, which is how our partnership started. So let me stop there. I'll just say that I welcome any and all of your questions. I'm also in India about 6 times a year, so I'm happy to meet with you there. Should you find yourself, or should I find myself in your area, or you find yourself in my area? We tend to travel quite a bit. I'm based in Mumbai. Please feel free to follow up if you have any questions at any points. Modality, even with the changes we're going to be making, it's going to take us a generation or 2 for that to come to fruition in your professional outputs. And so what I would say is, I think, if harnessed well, and I think that India really can and should be a leader of STEM. And your institutions of eminence, if we use a different term, I think that making your, I think that if I were at a high level in the higher education sector in India, one of my goals would be to make STEM like the gift of India to the world, and to make STEM a reason why people come to India from the rest of the world. It already should be. You're just not marketing it that way. Right? So India is a place that has more learning opportunities than I could imagine anywhere else, and yet seems to still have and I get it, colonialism lives long after the colonial rulers leave, but you're still acting as if you have something to learn from the rest of the world, and it's actually the rest of the world that has a lot to learn from you too. So I think some of that is a identity and attitudinal shift on the part of India that needs to be inculcated into your leadership, right? So I think India has STEM to offer the world, and I think that you should be recruiting the top students from around the world to come to your institutions. But that requires that you identify yourselves, more strongly and situate yourselves in ways where you have the bandwidth to do that. And the faculty that you have are supported in being thought leaders, right? So why are there so many brilliant faculty members walking around India not publishing? It's not prioritized, and it's not a part of their performance evaluation, or there's actually no performance evaluation. And so those are the kinds of structural things that could be changed in STEM-focused everywhere, but in STEM-focused higher education, so that you need like an image makeover, and to go with it, you need to elevate the level of scholarship, because you won't. One of the things that we do here in the U.S., and I'm not necessarily for it, but they count how many publications I have a year in which journals. I don't love it, depending on how well I've done that year. But there's high accountability for me and for my colleagues to be producing in the top journals, to produce X amount of books per decade, and that simply doesn't exist in India. It's like you're extra special grade if you take it upon yourself to publish, but it's not plowed into your system. So I think those are the structural things. When your preeminent faculty in India have a more global footprint in publishing, that's going to also affect it.
So we have run out of time, but this has been a wonderful exchange and conversation. As my colleagues have said, we are so grateful that you have made this long journey to visit us here at Penn.